How's it going, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Cream City Cast. My name is Dylan Piccolo, and I'm joined as always by my good friend and the editor-in-chief over at Cream City Central, Alexander Juno, here to talk about the Bucks season so far, where we're at and where we're headed, off to a phenomenal start so far in the 2018-19 season. Al, I mean, it's been a good time to be a Bucks fan.
Yeah, really cannot state that enough. Every game is fun to watch. Every game is competitive. Well, not every game's competitive, but
Yeah.
the Bucks play well every night they take the court. I don't think they really had a dud of a performance where you watch and you're like, wow, this was a waste of my time watching my team play today.
So the Bucks got off to a 7-0 start, ended in a 1-point loss to the Celtics, where we kind of saw the negative, not the negative side, but what happens when the Bucks aren't hitting threes. And when the Celtics, who hit a franchise record number of threes that night, were so let's talk first about those first 7 games, because I know we haven't done a podcast, but now we're back into it. So what about those first 7 games do you want to highlight about?
There's so many things that you could pick, but I guess just sort of how this roster fits together. We've seen like a lot of Bucks teams in the past where the coaches, even before Jason Kidd, couldn't really figure out what they wanted to do with the rotations. And Bud has a pretty good idea of what he wants to do with the rotations, and it seems like everybody has a pretty well-defined role. And guys are sort of flexible within those roles, but like they fit, and like all the shooting and stuff, it works. And people didn't think it would work. Like people were worried about the amount of shooting on the roster, that we wouldn't have enough, that stuff would fall apart, but it's been really good so far.
I think you're exactly right. The versatility of every player on the court at all times is actually unbelievable. And you look at some of these negatives that we had on our roster last year: John Henson, Tony Snell, they're playing good basketball. Malcolm Brogdon is playing. I mean, he's had some ups and downs this season, I think, but mostly ups, and he's been getting to the basket. You're seeing these role players, and let's not forget about the 2 guys John Horst brought in this offseason, Ersan Ilyasova and Brook Lopez, both making significant impact.
Can't forget about Pat Connaughton either.
Yep, and Pat, excuse me, of course. Pat has been absolutely a firecracker out there, and he does a little bit of everything, and that's sort of what you see Bud tending to go lean towards in those bench minutes with Pat and Dante DiVincenzo, because they both play in a similar fashion.
What's sort of crazy about it is that he got the 3 of those guys for $12 million. And like you can get into the who got what money and stuff like that, but the bottom line is that Pat Connaughton's here for the veterans minimum, and Brook Lopez is here for the biannual exception, which is only $3.4 million. So to get those guys at those prices and then get really good minutes out of them, not to mention the rookie Dante, Horst had a great summer. He found 4 contributors with limited resources for a team that was pushing the border of the cap.
And you have to think about kind of what having those bench players allows you to do. I mean, some of the Bucks' best stretches, especially during that 7-0 stretch, and even up until they lost 3 games, and now they're 10-3. The Bucks have had a lot of different lineups that have worked, and a lot of that can be the proficiency that the point guards that we've had play. I mean, Eric Bledsoe has been absolutely phenomenal so far, and I think that's another key, because once you can unlock that 3rd star with Giannis Antetokounmpo and Chris Middleton, then you can start seeing what these results can be like, because defenses are having problems. You can't double team Giannis in the paint. He'll dominate you there. And if you want to send assets there, you got 4 shooters always around him ready to go at any given time.
Absolutely. And I think in many ways we just see how it can look around Giannis. And I know there's been a lot of talk about how Giannis hasn't really reached his potential yet. But when you look up and down this roster, you have a lot of guys who are hitting career highs in per 36 numbers. Guys aren't getting 36 minutes, but like when you adjust for rate and efficiency and stuff like that, these guys are posting career numbers. We talk about how Brogdon's been up and down, and he truly has been. He didn't get off to a great start, but after this 4-game road trip where he sort of crushed it every game, he's at a career high in points, a career high in true shooting, and that matters, heading into a contract year to be scoring more than you ever have before in this sort of egalitarian system and to be getting efficient looks. I think when you add it up, 8% of his shots are coming in the long two area from 10 feet to 23 feet. So that's just ridiculous to be able to get 92% of your looks in favorable areas when you're not an elite athlete.
And you brought up the per 36 minutes. Every single Bucks player that plays significant minutes, actually everyone on their 1 through 14 roster right now has double-digit points. So I mean, it's working. I think it's just the thing I'm excited most about this offense is the ease that everything is happening with it. There's nothing that it seems like there's not too many possessions where I'm watching the game and I'm like, ooh, that was forced. You know what I mean? Like, wow, that was a bad take. A lot of these shots that the Bucks are getting are good shots.
And I think the thing that's jarring to some people is that pull-up threes are often pretty good looks. I know there's this old school mentality that you don't settle for a three early in the clock, and that's just garbage, if I'm being honest. Like, a three is frequently one of the best looks you're going to get just based on points per possession and stuff like that. When you look at the numbers, you got to realize just how good a three is to take no matter what point you are in the clock, because turning down a three to get a long two later is not smart. And you can say that, but you have to realize it.
And the Bucks are playing the numbers game on offense, but as well on defense. The Bucks have been dropping their centers back as guards are coming off of pick and roll, and they're letting them take that mid-range too. They don't want them to shoot a lot of threes. And look at the games that the Bucks have lost. Those are the ones that other teams have hit a lot of threes. So, and I think we need to definitely take a minute and discuss this Bucks defense. I think that that is one of the biggest parts they're doing to do so well. I mean, they are scoring a lot of points, but they're holding teams to right around 100, which is hard to do in today's NBA with how easy everyone's scoring. They have a 104.9 defensive rating. It's good enough for second in the league. So, I mean, we always knew that the Bucks had the athletes defensively to be a great team defensively, but now it seems like the puzzle pieces are being in the right place and they're unlocking their defensive potential.
What's crazy about this team is that they're top 5 on both ends of the court. They're actually top 3 right now, but we'll see where they end up settling in, maybe around the 30-game mark, because at that point you're pretty set in your trends. But if this is a top 5 team on both ends of the ball, 50 wins is low. And I think that's something that's going to come as a shock to a lot of Bucks fans and people everywhere, that this team might see not just like an 8-win improvement, but like an 18-win improvement or a 16-win improvement over last year.
You think they can make that jump?
Yeah, I think they already have. Like, honestly, with the way they're playing right now, I truly believe that they've played some of their toughest games of the season already in Denver, in Portland, in Oakland. Those are, like, you won't have to play in a road atmosphere that's really against a team that's that good, maybe in Toronto. But, like, I honestly don't know if I'm taking Toronto over Portland at this point, and I think Denver's a cut above.
Yeah, I mean, look at the Bucks' upcoming schedule. Grizzlies, Bulls, they host the Nuggets, host the Trailblazers, Suns, Spurs, at Hornets, and then Chicago at Knicks, Pistons, and then Golden State and Toronto. So, I mean, you probably have 5 games in a span of 12 to 15 that are difficult, that are man, maybe the Bucks won't win that game, but the rest of them, you feel pretty good going into those. I mean, we could be talking about some win streaks here, and if the Bucks get on a win streak, that could set them up well for the end of the season. You look at the Atlanta Hawks team that won 60 games. They started out in a similar fashion. So, I mean, it's not out of the question.
I think that, yeah, we're at the start of a stretch. They play against the Grizzlies at home on November 14th, which is this Wednesday. And then on Saturday, the 24th, they finish a 6-game homestand against the Spurs. So you're talking about 6 home games in like a 10-day stretch, all against teams. The best team you play is Denver, but over the next 10 games, you play Denver and Portland, but the rest of the teams might not even be playoff teams.
Right.
The Spurs will have a chance, but like we're looking at a lot of teams that just aren't very good. So, at the 22, 23 game mark, we might be talking about an 18, 19 win team already. And at that point, they would be on pace for, at least upper 50s.
Yeah, I mean, 60 wins. I know you've on your Twitter you have tweeted something in that nature. 60 wins could be in the ballpark, I think. I mean, obviously health is the biggest thing. The Bucks have been healthy so far this season, minus DJ Wilson, but that's who knows if he was going to even play.
Yeah,
but
imagine if we get him back.
Yeah, right. But you got to think about also what other teams in the Eastern Conference, the very exciting Eastern Conference now, I believe more exciting than the Western Conference, with the 76ers getting Jimmy Butler. What do you think that does for the Bucks' chances to make it out of the Eastern Conference, Jimmy Butler going to the Philadelphia 76ers?
The guy who overthinks basketball in me wants to say that it doesn't really affect them. The sort of realist in me, that maybe the pessimist, says that it makes it a little worse. In theory, the 76ers needed a player like Jimmy Butler. In theory, that was what they were supposed to get with Markelle Fultz. We're talking about a guy that can score, at all 3 levels. He can shoot it from distance, score at the rim, and make free throws and get to the free throw line. I don't know how well that works in practice. I don't know necessarily if they needed another ball handler, and I honestly think I would like the trade better if it had included Markelle Fultz and they kept Dario. The fit isn't perfect. The fit wasn't perfect with Dario because I think that Ben Simmons is more of a natural 4, maybe a 3, but you don't want to play Dario at the 3 just because of his foot speed, so he's more of a natural 4. But last year, I believe that Covington and Dario were 1 and 3 on the Sixers in 3-point makes with JJ Redick in between them. That matters. Like, Ben Simmons needs shooters. That's literally, you could have Ben Simmons and 4 shooters out there. If you put Ben Simmons in Giannis's place on the Bucks, Ben Simmons' numbers would look a lot better than they do right now. I don't think that taking away 2 of his best shooters helps him at all. And I just saw a clip of Fultz shooting free throws, and it had the biggest hitch in it I've ever seen. And that's honestly not an exaggeration. Literally everybody on the free throw, like about to rebound, went into the lane. I don't know how it all comes together. I warned people in our group chat about basketball that we shouldn't count them out yet just because the fit isn't good. Because last year, at this point in the season, they hadn't added Bellinelli and Ersan, which were huge parts of their roster. I just don't know which of those guys are going to become available this year that are going to immediately want to go to Philly and play with Jimmy Butler and Joel Embiid.
And I think you hit it on the head when you said Ben Simmons lost 2 shooters in this trade. I understand Jimmy Butler. I love Jimmy Butler. I think he's a good player. Went to Marquette, drafted in the I think it was like last pick or second to last pick.
I think it was the 30th pick in the first round.
Yeah, last picker in the first round. And he worked hard and went into superstardom, and he's good. But we have to look at the chemistry issues that he's had at every stop that he's been at. There's always been some flamboyant ending, and with Joel Embiid's personality, Brett Brown is. I watched some. I forgot what it was today. I think it was maybe First Take or something. I'm not sure, but they said is we have to start looking at Brett Brown now that Mike Budenholzer is playing or coaching the Bucks to do so well. Is Brett Brown the reason why they're not playing well? Because it's kind of a similar situation. And you think about it, Ben Simmons has now lost like what is it, four shooters: Ursan, Bellinelli, Covington, and Saric. So I don't know how that helps them. I think Jimmy Butler obviously is a good player, but I think it's going to be a little bit before they figure it out because, like you said, Fultz has some problems, and if you're going to be trying to get him minutes, Jimmy Butler does not mess around with that stuff, and I think that could be a hostile place, especially for Brett Brown. But in terms of how it affects the Bucks, I'm not too sure about like how I think the Bucks could still like beat them because Eric Bledsoe's been playing so well, and Malcolm Brogdon. Obviously, like it depends on the night of the season or whatever. But I think that I'm confident with this Bucks team. Do you think the Bucks need to make a move at all?
Let me rephrase the question and ask it back to you. You can add one player to this roster. Which position are you even targeting? Like obviously, if you could add Steph Curry to this roster, that'd be great. But like, let's say that you get the 30th best player at his position, somebody that's just, could start for you or something like that, maybe even 25th best at his position. What position do you want?
I mean, maybe I'm talking a small forward. Maybe upgrade that kind of position. I know you have Ursan. It's pretty flexible behind, Chris, but I mean, I just think that I guess like you're right. I am kind of troubled to think of what position I would add. I mean, I would maybe add another shooter, Kyle Korver, Jr. Maybe not J.R. Smith, but someone like him, kind of someone that can shoot. Not someone who's shoots a lot, but someone that can just go in there and knock it down. Kyle Korver comes to mind. I don't know what you would get off of that. Maybe some cap. I don't know how that would work because of our cap and everything, but I don't know. I mean, it's hard to think of a spot because everyone's been playing so well. And I guess we have to wait and see until, there's going to be stretches when someone isn't playing very well. And I guess we'll see whose stretch goes the longest in terms of that. I guess, and then vote them off the island, right?
Yeah, I like. In theory, the worst player that currently gets rotation minutes for the Bucks is probably John Henson.
Probably.
I don't know how debatable that is. He's making threes and stuff like that, and like I don't even think John Henson's like bad. Like I think he's going to get rotation minutes on a lot of teams. I don't know if the shooting's real, and I don't think that necessarily matters for the conversation. The only thing like I would really like to add would be a big that can sort of switch and move better. And he would have to move better than Ursan. Like he would have to give me a better center player than Ursan. And I don't know, like there's a chance that's Thon Maker. I don't know that you're gonna get a guy like that in on the buyout market. I don't know if a guy like that exists because I don't think like Draymond is that guy. Capella is probably that guy, but we're talking like a top 5 center that would be able to like do a lot of the stuff that you would want them to do defensively, be able to switch on a lot of guys and stuff like that. That's a really tough player to find. So like I get that you can never have too many wings, and I like the idea of getting somebody like Korver or Bellinelli, or let's say Miami falls out of it and they buy out somebody like Wayne Ellington. That guy's valuable, but like we're talking about a lot of guys who are defensive liabilities here. And like Connaughton and DiVincenzo aren't defensive liabilities. Tony Snell isn't a defensive liability. So unless one of those guys gets hurt or really loses their stroke or something, it's tough to see anybody being like a sizable upgrade. This isn't to say that like the roster's perfect, because no roster is perfect, but like aside from a top 10, 15, 20, even like 30 player, like if there's a chance to go get Brad Beal and you give up something like Malcolm Brogdon and like 8 first-round picks, it doesn't really matter. Yeah. Like if there's a package you can put on the table to get Bradley Beal next to Eric Bledsoe, next to Chris Middleton, even if you had to give up Eric Bledsoe, that type of thing, that elevates you a lot. That might make you like, I'm not saying that this is a team that could beat the Warriors, even though we saw them beat them, but Marcus Thompson had a really nice article for The Athletic about what you would need to beat the Warriors. And he basically said you need a top 5 player, like a top 10 5 player that can force the Warriors to make adjustments rather than adjust to the Warriors. And just because somebody like Giannis forces them to adjust. And I would love to see a playoff series between the two. I wish we could see it in like the second or third round, and not the only way we could see it is the finals, because I think the Bucks would look more competitive than a lot of teams do, because I think the matchup is a little more favorable. But I might be way too high on our team.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely riding it high right now. Although, we've kind of went loss, win, loss, win, loss, win the last 6, 3-3. But you got to think about just what this team, like, it's not what they need. I think it's just like, how do they perfect what they're doing? And I think that us as fans and, watching the games and analyzing it, we obviously expect perfection from an offense, but it is Mike Budenholzer's first year on the job, and we're less than 15 games in for the Bucks. So it's definitely a work in progress still, but the early return on your investment is good with everyone that you have. I want to touch on this briefly. The Bucks have a very important summer coming up, and it's never too early to talk about Bucks free agency, but the Bucks have some important contracts coming up. Eric Bledsoe, Chris Middleton, Malcolm Brogdon, Brook Lopez, to name a few. If there was a power ranking of those guys about who's most likely to return, obviously there's a lot of money involved and things of that nature, but what order would you say, Al, is of most importance to you so far?
If we're talking importance and not likelihood, I don't even know if I could do likelihood. Importance to me, I've wavered on this. I did tweet a similar question maybe after the 4th game or something like that, because I find it incredibly interesting. Middleton has to be number 1. I don't really think that there's many people out there debating it. Maybe I'll debate it. I think that would be kind of an interesting. I would have to be really on my game to debate it. But
Yep.
let's take Middleton as the consensus 1. I think that Brogdon has to be the consensus 4. I just think compared to what you're getting from Brook and Eric, there's just a big fall off. And that's very tough for me because Brogdon is one of my favorite players, and he's been really good lately. I've actually changed my mind on this since I tweeted it. I am going to go with Bledsoe over Lopez, because I do think that you can find people who give you reasonably enough what Lopez gives you. I just have to say he's underrated as a shooter. He's talking about Lopez here. If you get to the Bradley Center about 50 minutes before tip-off, he starts doing his warm-ups. He'll catch it. I've seen him make 15 in a row from 3, and he's catching 3 feet behind the arc. And that's just warm-ups, doesn't mean anything. But he's a way more fluid shooter than you expect, because a lot of guys don't do that. Like, people think that in warm-ups and stuff that NBA players will go 15 out of 15 regularly, and they just don't. And I think it speaks to just how fluid of a shooter he is. So it's very tough for me to take Bledsoe over him. But with what Bledsoe's giving you defensively right now at the point of attack, with his ability to get over screens, I didn't catch much of the Clippers game, and the Clippers aren't really the example that anybody trying to make my argument would use, because their point guard play just isn't on the same level. But if you look at what he did against Lillard, Curry, and Jamal Murray on 3 games of a 4-game road trip, like, that kind of defense is crazy. And you can say it's just a fluky bad shooting night, but like, he's been engaged. He's fighting over screens. I think he's he's got to be on pace to set a career high in blocks. He looks like he's back in his LA Clipper days when he was one of the best defensive point guards in the league. He's getting after it.
I think what's most impressive about Bledsoe is that within this offense, he can be aggressive. He can take those trips to the lane. While last year under Jason Kidd, if he would take an early drive to the basket and miss it, it would be detrimental for this offense. And within the Bucks offense as it is now, it just works. The floor is way more open, and he has gotten very, very good at finishing through contact, and he always has been, but you've especially seen it this year come out. When he gets contact in the air, he's strong enough to finish and make a lot of momentum changing baskets in big times. In addition to that, his three-point shot has been absolutely impressive. He's only hitting it at a 32% rate, but I feel like he's hitting a lot of big threes for this team when they need to. I mean, it's definitely something that we need to look at going forward, because he might have some bad games, and he did have some bad games at one point. He only scored 5 against Portland. But, I think Bledsoe's kind of, like I said earlier in this podcast, unlocking what the Bucks are going to do overall as their Bucks' third star. But, in terms of Brook Lopez, I think Brook Lopez adds a valuable skill set to this team, especially in Mike Budenholzer's offense. The ability to shoot the ball, pass it, rebound. I mean, the things that he's doing for this Bucks rebounding is phenomenal. So, it's hard to do that. I would probably go with the same list as you, but, depending on the value you get on a Lopez deal compared to a Bledsoe deal, I might be inclined to take the Brogdon and Lopez deal. Brogdon take 3 instead of 2.
Just Chris and Bledsoe, yeah.
I mean, there's definitely a way to. I mean, there's probably a way financially you can make that happen, but
it's without getting too bogged down in the cap stuff. It's going to be really tough. It's going to require some great negotiating. You hope, and you sort of pray. Maybe not pray. That might be a stretch too far. That the owners are willing to pay the luxury tax, and that Horst can work some stuff out so that this Bucks team, coming off a good playoff run, can keep their guys intact, and this isn't just sort of a one-year thing. And maybe they have to let one of those guys go, and maybe they're able to find a sort of bargain bin replacement for them. I don't know. A lot of it depends on what John Henson, Thon Maker, Dante DiVincenzo look like at the end of the year. Like, if Dante looks better than he is now, like, let's say he improves 20% on what he is now, I don't know how much worse than Brogdon he is after an NBA offseason. I think right now Brogdon's clearly a better player, and they're not like for like. They're not that similar of players. But when you're looking at what Budenholzer wants from his 2 guards, his combo type guards, they do a lot of similar things. One thing that I want to touch on about their deals is that years matter. But if you can get Bledsoe on a 3-year deal instead of a 4-year deal, and the same with Chris, pay him as much as he wants because he's much younger than the other guys, but also with Brogdon, just because of the inconsistencies of their game and the injury issues, I don't know if you want to commit 4 years to a guy like that, especially if you could get a team option on one of the years. Brooks interesting because he deserves way more money than he got this year, but I don't know if people are going to go all in for a 31-year-old per se. Like, I don't know if you're going to get a 4-year deal for him.
Yeah, and I think that we're kind of seeing with what happens right now with all these contracts is that the Bucks draft picks have not worked out in the last few years other than Dante DiVincenzo. And you're starting to feel the repercussions from that because of now we have to pay all these guys. And yeah, I mean, Eric Bledsoe's nice to have, but you don't have a point guard that would be good enough that you drafted where you can kind of let that go so you can allocate an asset somewhere else. So, I mean, I think it's definitely a predicament that John Horst and the owners and everyone there at the Bucks offices are going to have to figure out this off season. But I think as of where we stand right now, with the Bucks having a Grizzlies on Wednesday, Bulls on Friday, and then Monday, a week from when we're recording this podcast, the Nuggets. Um, Bucks 2-1 in that span would probably be worst case scenario, but you hope to go 3-0. What are you looking for this week for the Bucks? Particularly, I mean, I'd like to see what actually, you know what? I have a better question. What do you think Jabari Parker's game is going to be like on Friday?
I could see him scoring 20, but I think his net rating or his differential is going to be like negative 25. Like, I think that Giannis is just going to abuse him. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if he sat out. Like, I think he's scared. Like, I think he's going to either try and make a statement or he's going to play timid. Fans don't want to hate him. There's like a distinct group on Bucks Twitter that thinks that we're being too harsh. I personally think it's all warranted. So I think that he might put up some numbers, but if he does, they're going to be hollow, and the Bucks are going to win fairly easily.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to hear the crowd's reaction. I know it was definitely split on Twitter this offseason about Jabari. I was on the bandwagon to keep him, not for the deal that the Bulls gave him, but something if it was much more cap reasonable, then I would definitely have thought about bringing him back on like a 1-year deal. But whatever, he's there. He's not playing much defense. They're kind of figuring out what his issues are, and the Bucks are in a much better place at this point. I think that we're gonna cut this one off as it stands right now. I think we're good. Have a 3-game week until Monday. Get you out another podcast in that time period. Hopefully the Bucks will have a more improved record and we'll start to get a little more of that national love. I mean, we've definitely felt it a little bit this week on some of the national TV shows. So we'll see if we can keep that going, and hopefully the Bucks can continue to be one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference, along as their second place right now behind the Toronto Raptors, 2 games. So, any closing thoughts?
Honestly, no. I think I guess my one hot take is that I think Giannis cannot play up to his full potential and win MVP this year.
Why is that? Why is that? You can't just leave us with that.
I think we're already seeing it. Like, I don't think we've seen really an A+ game from Giannis or even an A game from Giannis. I think we're seeing a lot of A- and B+, and I think we're seeing him succeed despite all that and put up ridiculous numbers, ridiculous rebounds, assists, just gaudy counting stats while not being ultimate Giannis, like in his final form in the perfect flow of this offense. I do think he figures it out. I think it'll be maybe another 10 games or so until he really understands how to pick his spots in this new system, just because he's never really played in a organized, cohesive system. Like, this is his first time doing that, and I think that's kind of a tough adjustment. So, yeah.
I think if Giannis wants to win MVP, he's going to have to do big in some big games. He did it against Golden State. If he doesn't, these Bucks have 18 national TV games this year, and if he goes off in a lot of them, national media is going to notice him. That's what it's about, getting those big stat lines in big games, in my opinion.
I think less so than national media. It's just like
the hype surrounding him.
The hype surrounding the team and the story. Like, if the Bucks win 58 games, Budenholzer's going to win Coach of the Year. I've been pushing John Horst for Executive of the Year because of these just the bargain bin signings we're talking about at the beginning. And most valuable player, you want to give it to that team. Like, I don't think they'll give it to a Warrior. I think Steph would have to be insane for them to give it to him. Like, he would have to improve on his already ridiculous numbers. The Lakers aren't good. The Rockets aren't good. The Thunder are meh.
Yeah.
Like, who else are you going to give it to?
No, you're right. I mean,
Kawhi's sitting out games.
Yeah, can't give it to him. Yeah, I mean, if he keeps playing how he is and the Bucks keep winning, I mean, he's gonna have as good of a chance as anybody. I don't, you know, I mean, I don't want to get into this right now because like we're trying to end it,
Yeah, I
but
dropped a bomb at the end there. That was too much.
no, but like I know Anthony Davis is good, dude, but I just don't buy into the MVP hype. Maybe it's just like a feeling that I have, and maybe I'm wrong about it, but it just doesn't feel like it fits right. Anthony Davis MVP. So we'll get into that later. It'll be another podcast. It'll be another time.
Yeah, maybe we'll get some writers on from the other contenders, their blogs and stuff like that, and we'll have a nice debate over it once we have more of a feel of the field.
Yeah, absolutely. But it appears the Milwaukee Bucks are that team that will be competitive in the top four in the East, at least with Boston, Toronto, and the 76ers with newly acquired Jimmy Butler. So for myself, Dylan Piccolo at DP _hoops on Twitter. Follow me. Got some cool Buck stuff out there. You can follow Al at Junes Fashiz, best Twitter name in the game
Oh,
over
100.
there. All of his stuff over at Cream City Central. Always check Cream City Central out for the latest in Wisconsin sports. Bucks, Brewers, Bucks, all that good stuff, and Wisconsin Badgers as well. So we want to thank you. We'll talk to you later this week. Have a good rest of your night.